excited this morning. We're going to continue on in our series, Breaking the Barriers. And this is a thinly disguised sermon series that kind of has its roots in the 12 steps. And we've been going for a while. This week, we're going to kind of finish it off. So, again, for those of you who don't know my story, I was an addict for about 15 years on pills. And it cost me my job and my home. Fortunately, I had a stubborn wife who stayed with me, and like Deb always says, she was like, I knew that was not the end of what God had for us. And so she stayed with me as I've been in recovery clean now for 15 years. So we've now matched 15 years of use, 15 years clean. But one of the ways, God uses all sorts of stuff to help us through struggles. And not just chemical stuff, but those hang-ups and those barriers that keep us from connecting with God. As I look back, it's a lot about control and barriers, regardless of what our thing is. It may be pills, it may be drugs, it may be alcohol, it may be all sorts of different things, but they are the things that we build up in our lives that are barriers to us knowing God. And one of the ways that the 12 steps help me is to categorize. It helps me kind of work through what is keeping me from connecting with God, and how can I remove that? How can I work on that? And so it's not, that's not strictly biblical. I mean, there's no 12 steps in the Bible, but each one of them, I've noticed, has its roots in a spiritual, a Christian or a spiritual or biblical truth. So we've been talking about that. So this week, we're kind of towards the end. One of my favorite things that I get to do as a pastor, one of the beautiful things of being a solo pastor of a small church is I can do what I want sometimes. And the one program that we have every week, our midweek program, is our Life Path, our Jesus-based 12-step program that meets on Wednesday nights at 5:30. Not a commercial, but it's a little bit of a commercial. If you know somebody that could use that, have them get in touch with me. And that group goes from 1 to 10, 12 guys, depending on the week. So I'm excited about continuing in that. And that helps me, it's a selfish thing, helps me continue in my journey. And so our life is a journey. I think one of the things we get confused is, one of the things that is difficult in our life, especially as a Christian, we want to say the right thing, or believe the right thing, or think the right thing and have it all change and be good today. Now forever. That now everything, I finally have figured out the key. And if I just say it, if I just believe it, if I just pray it, if I just show up at the right thing, now from now on, it's going to work great. And I'm going to be fixed. And sadly, but I think more powerfully, Jesus says, no, I'm going to walk with you. The goal is to walk with you. And let's remove those barriers that connect us to God. So we need to continue to walk in faith as we serve others by passing on what we've learned and what we've experienced. The steps that we're looking at tonight, or this morning, we have 6. We're going 6 through 12, sort of. We're going to talk about 6, 7, 10, 11, and 12. We're skipping a couple in the middle there. But here are these steps. Let me read these to you, and hang with me. If you've ever heard these, if you've ever been in a group before, we're going to talk about them a little bit, how God can use these. So step 6 is this, that we were entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. Step 7, we humbly asked God to remove all our shortcomings. And then we're going to skip to step 10. We continued to take personal inventory. We talked about that, making amends. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where we admit that we have issues. And not only admit them to ourselves, that's hard enough. Admit them to God, who is a gracious, loving, perfect God who loves us no matter what. But the rubber meets the road when we admit it to another person. And we have to say, yeah, by the way, I'm not perfect. And then we get to experience not only the grace and forgiveness of God, but we can begin to experience that in our lives. When we see God reflected in another human being, when they look at us and they're like, I love you. Yeah, that's horrible. I still love you. That is a turning point in our lives. So we talked about that. So part of this is, yes, we ask God to remove these. And the next part is saying that every single day I take personal inventory. And when we're wrong, I like that it's assumptive here. Oh, you're going to be wrong still. When we're wrong, we promptly admit it. Step 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious, our purposeful connection with God, praying only for knowledge of His will and how to carry that out. And then step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and practice these principles in all our affairs. I kind of lump all this because to me, these is kind of one continuous idea. The idea that we're talking about this week is keeping going. We've talked about tearing down barriers. We realize life is this journey that God has called us to, not perfection, but process, that we're going to get there, that he's going to love us, and that there are things in our life that then keep us from having that connection and fulfilling relationship with Jesus. And we need to begin to see how to remove those. And one of the issues is when we get to those barriers, sometimes we feel like we have the strength to climb over it, and sometimes we feel like this is it, I can't go any further. And we want to talk about keeping going. I was talking with my wife just this morning about how we're kind of wired different. Deb is a project person. She is at her best when she has a vision and she has a project that she's going to work on. And she goes after it with all of her soul. And she had 2 different kind of projects that she's been working on, some painting in the house and then also getting rid of some things. And she has gone after it. And I was saying the way I know she's got a vision and a project is when she is walking with purpose through the house. I don't know if you've ever lived with somebody or been married or had a sibling or something who was this person. When you hear them, boom, 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 boom. She's a tiny little person. Boom. It is loud and purposeful as she moves throughout the house. I am a churner. I am a grinder. I am a manager. I am good at just the day-to-day stuff. I do not stomp with purpose through the house. I feel around her sometimes I feel like a shambling, slow shuffle through life. Because I'm doing the same thing every day. I'm cleaning the kitchen, I'm cooking the food, I'm putting it away. And when I kind of do everything that I've kind of had in my normal routine, then I'm done. And you can tell the difference. So I realize that this is one of those things that sometimes it takes life of being a Deb that you've got to work through, you've got to tear down these barriers and then keep going. You got to have both pieces. The energy to work through some hard stuff, and then when it's torn down, then be the shambler, the grinder, and keep moving. So this first part is keep going, continuing, moving through. We want to talk about these issues, these barriers. We want to remove the barriers, not reform them. Remove, not reform. When we talk about, and we want to do this humbly. I love that part in step 7. We humbly ask God. Humble does not mean, I think, for most of my life, I thought humble meant being humiliated. To be humble, you had to be lowly. You had to have no worth. You had to acknowledge that somebody was better than you, and you are worth nothing, and I am a worm. Couldn't be further from the truth. Humble just means realization of our place, not worthlessness. We are anything but worthless, especially according to God, right? We are created in God's image. We are loved so much that Jesus came to earth and humbled himself to be like us, even to the point of death on a cross. We are so worthwhile. We are worth rescue. So humble does not mean lowly. Humble means recognizing, yeah, I am who I am. I am not God. I have flaws. I am a fallible human being. And I am on a journey, and I admit that proudly. We are humble proudly. You ever heard somebody say that? I am twice as humble as you. I am the most humble. And I will beat you at humility any day. But we humbly admit this. We know our place. We know we are loved, but we also know we got work to do. And then we said we remove. We're going to remove these barriers, remove these things. We're going to delete them, erase them, throw them away. Reform means to change in hopes of improving, to manage. When I talk about addiction, when I talk about struggles with addiction, one of the biggest pitfalls is managing. All I really want to do. I've had so many guys come through that I meet with. That's the goal. I just want to manage it. I can still use, but I just want to use less. I can still drink, but I just want to drink less. I still, I can look at stuff and I can go to these places and I just want to manage it. If I could just manage it. And you've heard me talk about this before. The danger of the word just. If I could just blank, then everything would be great. We're not taught here to reform. Trying to think of illustrations of trying to reform something rather than remove it. If you have a dead bear in your house, you need to remove that stinky carcass, not try and make it a rug. That's not a perfect analogy, but I think you see where I'm going there. What is the best thing for an actual defect of character? Remove it or reform it? Removing it. when I think of working on my car, when there is a part that is broken, I have times, because I'm cheap, tried to fix that part. It has never worked. No matter how much JB Weld you put on it, it is going to blow. You need to replace it. You need to remove it. We're going to be looking mostly today in Philippians 3, my favorite book in the Bible. Philippians 3:12 says this. I don't mean to say that I have already achieved these things or that I've already reached perfection. As I press on to possess the perfection for which Christ Jesus first possessed me. What a weird verse. He's just been talking about all his good and bad pedigree. Paul has been saying, I have all the credentials. If you were going to list me as good guys who are close to God, who have no barriers between me and God, who is connected, it would be me. He said he was a zealot, meaning he was so hardcore that he was even attacking and hurting others who didn't believe exactly the same way he did. He had all the right religious, racial, and cultural standing. Everybody from the exterior would say, this guy he must be the closest to God that we know. But he talks about them saying, you know what, compared to actually connecting with God, compared to actually knowing Jesus, that is trash. It is garbage. To know Jesus and the grace that changed Paul's life makes all that other stuff, all that work, all that cultural, racial, religious baggage trash. He's talking about the real thing. That's what he strives for now, is the perfection of faith, the perfection of Jesus. The humility of Jesus. It just said before, he just had said, look, Jesus did not see being connected with God as a thing he had to reach out for. It just wasn't him. And in fact, he was so connected, he is God, that he then humbled himself to be one of us. His pursuit is not perfection of action. His pursuit is perfection of Jesus. Connection and knowing and being one with Christ. That is the real pursuit. That is the face of the struggle. Pressing on to connect and know Jesus. And out of that then flows correct behavior. He reflects this in another passage in Romans. This is on your screen, but Romans 12:1 and 2 says this. Don't copy the behavior and customs of the world. And this might get confusing, but trust me. But let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you'll learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Change to a new person, not reform your defects, remove them so that you are a new person. When we focus on God, when we quit trying to do all the things that we know as a person, and when it talks about the customs of this world, we're not just talking about things that we would say are evil. These are even things that we would say maybe are good, churchy things, if we're depending on things that we can control and be in charge of. Just like Paul. Paul did all the stuff. Everything the church required. And he said it's trash compared to connection with God. So what's that perfection? I love this truth from this verse. It means that there is real hope and encouragement on our journey. That we can become new. We can actually become perfect. Not perfect that we never fail, and we'll talk about that more, but perfection according to what Christ offers. Perfection meaning we are connected with God. And in reality, it is possible to embrace this struggle, to remove these barriers and know God. That we can actually remove the defects of character. We can see those removed and become a new person. And we do that by how we think, what our priority is. Paul says that we should and can keep going when we reach barriers, the things that keep us from knowing God. When we realize we are disconnected from God, we can move through them. Our hope is to press on and seek the perfection of Jesus. Let's talk about this for a minute. The perfection that Jesus offers here and later in eternity, growing, and it is a growing journey looking more and more like him. What is that perfection? I got to admit, it is vastly different than I have thought. This in the last 10 years, my thinking and my understanding has changed a lot. It's vastly different than what I thought before. I think before I thought of perfection as never failing. My goal is I'm never going to fail. If I begin to think that that's perfection, then I am going to lie and hide every failure. Nothing kept me in addiction longer than trying to pretend like I wasn't an addict. Because I was afraid that I would be unloved and I would be cast out and I would be hated rather than cared for and forgiven and loved. It is not never struggling. Perfection is not always winning. It is trusting and growing in faith, growing in knowledge, changing our mind to new teachings, not just what I always thought and what we always assumed. That's the definition of humility, accepting grace and forgiveness and peace and a willingness to actually change our mind. Some of you have been followers of Jesus for a long time. When was the last time you changed your mind? Did you figure it out at 27 and now you're good? I've had my mind changed. God has revealed some things to me. Not necessarily I wish it was a voice from heaven, Dave, you were wrong, right? It's usually been being around people and life showing me, oh, I did not understand this. To be honest, usually through my own failings. We need to be willing to change our mind. We need to be willing to open our mind. We need to be willing to actually seek and pray and ask God to show us the truth, not just what is comfortable or what I've always believed or what the rest of the people around me believe so that I fit in. It's not power. This journey, this idea of success, this idea of perfection does not result in power and wealth and comfort and security and maintaining the status quo. It is sacrifice, it is love, it is trust, and it is rest as we realize I don't need to fix it. Who is it that changes us and makes us a new creature? Is it that we finally figured it out? We believed all the right things? We checked everything off the list and we did quit making any mistakes? No, God makes us a new creature. It is sacrifice and it is rest. When I'm struggling, when I want to change, I do reach out to God. I usually trust God, but what I want him to change is the situation, and usually he just wants to change me. Usually when I'm struggling, I want God to fix everything else around me. I want more resources. I want more happiness. I want something to be fixed. I want you to be a better church group of people. Joke. Usually, though, in the middle of that, God is like, yeah, I'll deal with the situation. But what I want to change first is you. You need to continue working on being a new creature. You need to continue to turn yourself over to me so I can make the changes in you that I want. So how do I continue on the path? When I do face a barrier, when I begin to that point and I want to say, yes, God, remove it, what do I do? It's time to act. It's not just let go and let God. It's changing our mind to remove the old barriers and replace with a new character empowered with the empowerment offered by Jesus. Taking the barrier down, letting God drip it away and replace it, thinking differently, changing our mind. First of all, just some practical stuff. Submit. Sounds simple. Oh, just submit to God. That means we acknowledge that we don't know it all. We don't already have it figured out. That means we're constantly in the process of asking God and studying and talking to people and learning from our situation how we can better be a reflection of God. And what God calls us to do is to love him and love people. If we're at a loss and we don't know what to do with some of the list of rules, what loves God and what loves people? We need to be willing to change our mind. We submit to God, then we change our mind. We study and pray and ask others. Sounds so simple. Yeah, read what he says in his word. Spend time in that. Study the Bible. Pray and ask him to reveal what he wants you to learn from that today. And then you ask people that you trust. People that you love. People that know God and, ouch, know you well enough to go, no, you're off base. Or to say, yeah, you need to learn that. Be willing to admit that our thinking has been wrong. Maybe even I might even have an opinion that's not correct. Wow. How common is that in our culture today? To go, yeah, hey, you know what? When was the last time we saw any politician From either side go, you know what, my bad. I was wrong, I changed my mind. I wish there was times, I have seen a few of them and they've been eviscerated. I would love a public figure to say, you know what, this is the dad I had at the time. I made a decision. I look back, it was wrong. I blew it. Let's try and fix it. That's seen as weakness, but God, that is strength. That is humility. That is removing defects. Admit that we might not be the only one in the whole world who figured it out. So that we can see the defects in our characters and the difficulties in our lives and those things that are causing us not to be able to connect with God as real, but this is important. They are real things. There is real failure. There are real struggle. There are real barriers, but that is not what defines me. There's some labels we give ourselves. I'm a liar. When I was using, I lied all the time. But I am not a liar. I failed all the time. I'd set out to do something, I'd fail, but I am not a failure. I was an addict. I still am. Struggle with food. I replace pills with Hostess. But I am not an addict. I make dumb choices, but I am not stupid. Right? We are not made up of what our failures are. We are made up of the character of God. We need to remove those barriers. Those barriers are not who we are, even though they feel like it. We need to be seen as God's children who are given the ability to be free from our sin and have the barriers between us and God torn down. That is who we are. When I was in rehab, they used to say 1 day at a time. And I used to translate that 15 minutes. And because I would always go, okay, I'm going to stay here in rehab for 15 more minutes and then I'm leaving. And at the end of that, I'd go, okay, I can probably make another 15. It's a journey and a process, and we need to give ourselves time and the same grace that God gave you. We are not more, we don't have a higher standard than God. If Jesus loves you as you are, it's okay for you to give yourself that same love. Choose to be willing to change and live in a world that is not as I would have it. Let go of control. Make the choice. Stop scheming. Stop manipulating. Stop worrying. Be humble and trusting. These barriers between us and God, if there is sin, if there is struggle, if there is a recurring issue, turn it over to God. Yes, begin to submit and realize even if I fail today, I'm going to get up tomorrow and continue to work. I'm going to continue to move through. Because God is in control. God is working on me, not just me. He is working to make me a new creature. And each one of these changes of mind, each one of these little steps is something that's going to get me closer. And I need to accept in the middle of all that, that it's good. Because there are times that changing for the good seems like the bad. It is painful, and it is uncomfortable, and it is admitting things we don't want to admit. It will get easier. Not just easier, whatever issue we're dealing with, but it will get easier to trust God. I told you about a friend who hadn't been a part of church, and he asked me the very first time we go to lunch, we're sitting down, he looks at me and he goes, how do you get faith? I was like, I don't know. He goes, do you just decide one day I'm going to believe this? And I was like, wow, that is great. I said, there's part of that we have a decision. Part of it is studying and being confident. Some of it is a supernatural thing. God gives us faith. But a lot of it is having a reservoir of experience. There is this vast reservoir where God has come through for me and He's changed me and He's worked on me and I've seen Him bring me out of crisis. And now when I'm struggling now I've got a new crisis, I can go, oh wait, I can trust God because He fixed it this time. Not just mine, the stories of each one of you. We have this vast witness, this reservoir of success, a vast reservoir of God coming through that gives us hope in our progress. So we can be patient. Some verses that say it better than I can. They're not on the screen or on your page, but Philippians 1:6. I am certain that God who began a good work within you will continue His work until it is finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns. A lot of times we focus on the Jesus returning part. Yeah, we should. That'd be fantastic. I'm excited for that. Right? But I love this part. He is going to continue to work on it every day, even when you don't want to. And couple that with this. Psalm 46:10. Work hard and fix yourself. No, it says this. Be still and know that I am God, and I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world. The Dave translation, shut up for a minute and trust that I'm going to care for you because I'm God. So keeping moving means don't go backwards. Continue to take personal inventory, that whole idea, and prayer and meditation. The next passage, Philippians 3:13 through 16, as we're continuing to move forward, as we keep moving, we don't want to go back. No, dear brothers and sisters, is Paul talking again, I haven't achieved it. I'm not perfect. But I focus on one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Jesus Christ, is calling us. Let all who are spiritually mature agree on these things. If you disagree on some point, I believe God will make it plain to you. But we must hold on to the progress we've already made. Paul says, hey, keep moving forward by focusing on connection with Jesus. Forget what lies behind. Don't go backward. Don't go back to your old patterns and sins and cycles and shame and failure, all that stuff that just kept us in emptiness. Don't go back to the old systems of legalism and rules and self-sufficiency and attempts to be good. That always leads to judgment and hate and failure. Look, here's the thing. Love Jesus. He's the prize. He's the prize. Living, knowing and living like Jesus, connection to Jesus is the thing that will tear down the barriers. I know this to be true. When I was using, I would wake up every morning and I would quit. This is the day. I'm going to quit today, and I'd ball up my fist and I'd make my knuckles white and I'd grit my teeth, and today's the day I'm stopping. And about 20 minutes later I was taking pills. Eventually though, and I wish I could bottle it. I wish I could put it in a pill and give, well, no, that's probably a little ironic, but I wish that I could explain it in such a way or just hand it out, that at some point in the middle of that, I actually turned it over to God and was like, I just can't do this anymore. And I don't know what was different that day than the day before, but on that day, He allowed me to continue. He forgave me just as much as He forgave me the day before. He gave me the strength and gave me the ability to get through a day. And you know what? It was because I knew I was loved. As sinful and as lyey and as dumb as I was being, I was loved. I didn't have to go back to the old patterns. And when life felt bad, when life felt empty, when I really wanted to use again, He allowed me to have moments where I experienced joy and peace and comfort and forgiveness. Don't go backwards. Don't go back to control. How do we keep from going backwards? How do we keep from going back to those things? Never have a failure? Okay, so here's the trick. I did have one counselor when I was in rehab be like this. Here's how you don't relapse. Never use again. Well, yeah. That's like me coming up and saying, okay, from now on, don't sin anymore. Stop it. Some of you did right there. You said, what an idiot. That's not nice to say to your pastor in your head. Never have failure. No. Relapse, failure, sin is a reality of a broken world. Going back means not looking forward. Going back means if I do fail, that I quit. The only failure is not getting back up again and continuing on the journey and allowing that barrier to be permanent. A few little practical things. I'm going to power through the rest of this. Practice self-evaluation every day. Take a moment. Do an inventory or whatever you want to call it. But pray and look at yourself and go, how did today go? What do I need to repent of? What do I need to confess? Pray and meditate and read and evaluate and listen and talk. Look at the building blocks of failure. The building blocks of going backwards are, am I hurting, exhausted, angry, resentful, intense, heart, right, that old thing? What's bothering me? Am I at a bad place? Do I need to be aware and kind of reach out extra to God and make sure I don't go back to those old struggles? The way, though, that we keep moving forward is focusing on Christ and moving forward. And we'll end with this. We bring others along. Bring others along. Our mission is not just to fix ourselves, not to see ourselves better, but we get to bring others. Nothing makes me more encouraged to stay on the path that I'm on as getting to do it with others. Number 2, bring others along. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. Let me put a little comma here. Results of these steps doesn't mean the 12 steps are magical and brought us there. It means that, hey, you went through this process. Whatever that process looked like, now you're having this awakening. We tried to carry that message to others and practice these principles in all our affairs. That's my favorite part. These principles don't just help me not take pills. These principles help me love people better. They help me be better at my job. They help me take care of people around me. They help me do projects that I don't feel like doing. Philippians 3:17-21 says this, "Dear brothers and sisters, pattern your lives after mine and learn from those who follow our example. For I've told you often before, and I say it again with tears in my eyes, that there are many whose conduct shows they're really enemies of the cross of Christ. They're headed for destruction. Their God is their appetite. They brag about shameful things, and they only think about this life here on earth, but we are citizens of heaven, where the Lord Christ lives. We are eagerly waiting for him to return as Savior, and he will take our weak mortal bodies and change them into the glorious bodies like his own, using the same power which he will bring eventually everything under his control." Philippians 4:9 reiterates this as shorter. "Putting into practice all that you learned and received from me, everything that you heard from me and saw me doing, then God, the God of peace, will be with you." It seems so arrogant, doesn't it? It always kind of rubbed me the wrong way growing up. Paul's like, hey, here's the secret to living a good life and being good. Be more like me. Get a load of this. Right? No. He's saying, yeah, follow me, because what if he just said, hey, my life was trash. I got nothing to offer other than I press on to try and be like Jesus. So here's the deal. Admit all the stuff you thought was great is trash and love Jesus and be loved by him. Here's the trick. Quit trying so hard. Love God and allow him to love you. And then start walking. Then start living. And then grab a bunch of people to go with you. Keeps moving forward. Keeps walking with Jesus. We need each other. Galatians 6 talks about this idea of sharing each other's burdens. Especially, I love this part. It's like, if you see somebody else screwing up, slap them, tell them they're horrible. No, it says, if you see someone messing up, share their burdens. Come alongside them. Be a family, be a church. Share the responsibility. We need a fellowship. Okay, I'm going to tell you an embarrassing thing. Confession. One of my big entertainment, the thing that I do to disconnect, is I connect. I get online and I play Lord of the Rings online. It is a 17-year-old game. You can play it on a potato. You don't need a really good computer. And my brother-in-law and I put on our little headphones and we run around, and I'm an elf and he's a dwarf, and we fight goblins. To get loot. You know what? To finish a lot of that game, you got to have a fellowship. You can't just do it by yourself. You got to have somebody who can heal you from damages, and somebody who is a really good fighter, and somebody who can sneak. And you got to have a fellowship. You know what? Christian life is like Lord of the Rings online. You got to have a fellowship. You got to have people who are different than you to help you when you're down. This is an epic quest called life. And we need each other. Jesus told us that, so that when I fail, you call me back. When you fail, I call you back. It's not accountability. It's community. Compassion and community are what gets us through it. So those of you who are on the spiritual path need to look for others who need to join us, because we want to take Jesus seriously. Make sure we're moving on the right path. Like it says, those of you who are spiritual. That sounds like, I am spiritual. Right? No, that was what would have happened if I would have led singing today. The point is, those of you who are spiritual are those of you who are trying to be on the path of Jesus. You're the ones who are spiritual. Not perfect, but you're walking. And grab someone else by the hand and have them walk with you. So let's keep moving toward Jesus. And resist the temptation to turn back to our old systems and patterns and manipulation. And start an epic journey that someday would be worthy of a song. I'm going to leave us with this. My favorite verse. Well, top 10. I say that every week. This is my favorite verse. Philippians 1:6. I'm certain that God, who began a good work in you, will continue his work until it is finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns. May we be people who always strive to grow closer to God, refuse to be pulled back into our old ways of selfishness, legalism, and judgment, and generously help others to connect to God along with us. Thank you very much, and we will see you next Sunday.